I have been an archivist for 63 standard years. I have catalogued the burning of the Threnosi moons. I have filed the testimony of the last surviving Quelari diplomat after the massacre at Sarin Deep. I have read accounts that made my secondary heart seize mid-beat, accounts so horrifying that I needed a full lunar cycle of quiet meditation before I could continue my work. None of that, not one word, not one document, not one holographic recording, prepared me for what I found when I opened the ICR 7741 Delta file. This archive began, as most do, with a routine distress signal, a coalition military outpost, a border engagement gone catastrophically wrong, a request for reinforcements through the standard emergency relay channels. What followed was not routine. What followed was, and I am choosing this word very carefully after considerable reflection, unprecedented. What I have assembled here is the complete record, every testimony I could locate, every sensor log that survived, every personal account from soldiers, diplomats, civilian contractors, and bystanders who witnessed what happened when humanity, when the Deathworlders, answered that call. I want to be honest with you before you read further. I went into this archive expecting a military document, a record of a battle, ship counts, casualty figures, strategic maneuvers. What I found instead was something closer to a confession, a collective one, spoken by dozens of different species in dozens of different languages, all saying essentially the same thing. We did not understand what we were asking for. We did not understand what they were. And when we finally saw it, truly saw it, some part of us changed permanently. I have done my best to present these accounts in chronological order. Where timelines conflict, I have noted the discrepancies. Where testimony contradicts the sensor data, I have flagged it. Where I personally found certain accounts difficult to believe, I have said so, and then included them anyway, because in every case, the corroborating evidence eventually appeared. This is not a comfortable document. Read it completely or do not read it at all. Avi, San Senior Archivist. Coalition Memory Vaults Level 12. Orion Cluster Station 9. Standard date, 7741 Delta. Part 1, the call goes out. Section 1.1, the last transmission from Karath Station. Recovered from emergency relay buoy ER-229, Coalition Outer Rim. Signal degradation, 34%. Partial reconstruction by Coalition Comms Division. Recording timestamp, approximately 14.7 standard hours before the Terran fleet emerged from fold space. The first voice on the recording is female. Coalition identification tags her as Commander Essa Vilrath, Keth Species, Third Cycle Officer, Karath Border Station. She is not panicking. I want to note that clearly because it matters for understanding the recording. Commander Vilrath is not panicking. Her voice is calm. It is the specific kind of calm that people develop after they have already moved through panic and come out the other side, into something quieter and more final. She says, "This is Karath Station to Coalition Central Emergency Relay. Authentication code Vilrath 77 Blue Crescent. We are currently engaged with a Vrethkai assault force. Designation unknown. Strength unknown. Our outer defense grid went down approximately 4 hours ago. We have lost contact with 3 of our 5 orbital platforms. Station structural integrity is at 61% and falling." A pause. In the background, there is a sound like something tearing. We have approximately 400 personnel aboard, mixed species, civilian contractors, military staff, 1 diplomatic observation team. We have done everything we can with what we have. Another pause, longer. We are requesting immediate reinforcement from any Coalition Rapid Response Unit within range. We are also, and I want this on record, formally requesting Terran assistance through the Human Integration Protocol. We are invoking Article 14. Article 14. I had to look that up when I first found this recording. Most people in the Coalition have never heard of it, let alone invoked it. Article 14 of the Human Integration Protocol is the provision that allows non-Terran Coalition members to formally request direct Terran military assistance in situations where standard Coalition forces are deemed insufficient. It had been invoked 3 times in the 11 years since humanity joined the Coalition. The first 2 times, it resulted in a small team of human military advisors arriving quietly and helping to stabilize a situation before it escalated. This was the third time. Commander Vilrath continues, I am aware of the implications of this request. I am aware of the protocols and the response time estimates and the political dimensions. I want it noted that I am making this request with full knowledge and full authority. Karath Station is going to fall without help. We cannot hold indefinitely. The recording ends there. The relay buoy captured approximately 40 more minutes of fragmentary transmissions from Karath Station after that. Status updates, casualty reports, a brief and painful exchange between Commander Vilrath and someone she calls Reth, who appears to be her second in command. But the core of it is right there in those first words. We are invoking Article 14. Section 1.2, Personal Account. Ambassador Grevik Olanth, Thurvan Diplomatic Corps. Recorded at Coalition Trauma Recovery Facility, Station 9. Interview conducted by Archivist Trainee Messa Quellen, supervised by Senior Archivist Vailthris San. Standard date, approximately 90 days post-incident. Ambassador Grevik Olanth is a large being. Thurvan, which means he stands nearly 2.5 meters tall, with a characteristic broad thorax and 4 upper limbs of his species. He was part of the diplomatic observation team aboard Karath Station when the Vrethkai assault began. He agreed to be interviewed, but asked that we begin with something specific. He wanted to explain what he knew about humans, what he thought he knew before the incident, so that the contrast would be properly documented. This is what he said. I had met humans before, several times. The Coalition integration ceremonies, a trade summit on Pelin Station, a joint research conference on xenobiology. I believe there were 2 Terran scientists at that one. I found them, and I want to be accurate here, pleasant. Surprisingly soft-spoken for creatures of their reputation. The female scientist, I cannot remember her name now, she brought what she called cookies and distributed them to everyone in the conference hall. They were extraordinary. We spent approximately 40 minutes discussing the cookies. I found her delightful. He pauses here. He has a habit of folding his upper 2 limbs across his chest when he pauses. It gives him the look of someone hugging themselves. I had heard the stories, of course. Every species in the Coalition has heard the stories. The homeworld reports, the environmental classification, the biological data, the immune systems, the pain tolerance, the bone density reports, which were, I admit, extremely disturbing to read in the abstract. But meeting them in person, they seemed so normal. They laughed at small things. They got excited about food. The male human at the trade summit spent 20 minutes explaining to me the specific differences between 2 types of earth beverages called coffee and espresso, and he was genuinely, visibly passionate about the subject. Another pause. I had entirely miscalibrated my understanding of what they were. I had looked at the friendly creature explaining coffee to me, and I had thought, yes, I understand these beings. They are unusual, but they are comprehensible. He unfolds his arms, leans forward slightly. I was wrong. I was so completely, catastrophically wrong that I am still, 90 days later, processing the degree of my wrongness. I think about it every day. What I thought I knew, what I thought I understood. He stops. Would you like me to continue to the incident itself? Yes, Ambassador, please continue. Section 1.3, Technical Summary. Vrethkai Assault Force Initial Assessment. Compiled by Coalition Military Intelligence, Outer Rim Division. Clearance Level 5 and above. The Vrethkai Dominion had been a destabilizing presence along the Coalition's outer rim for approximately 3 standard years before the Karath Station incident. They operated on a hit-and-run model. Rapid assault forces. Highly mobile, extremely aggressive, exploiting gaps in Coalition patrol coverage along the less defended border stretches. The force that hit Karath Station was, by Vrethkai standards, substantial. Military intelligence estimates placed initial assault strength at approximately 47 combat vessels, a mix of their light attack craft, 3 of their mid-weight carrier destroyers, and at least 2 of the heavy siege platforms that had become their signature weapon for station assault. Karath Station's defense complement was 12 vessels. 4 had been destroyed in the opening engagement. 3 more were heavily damaged. By the time the distress call went out, Commander Vilrath had 5 functional combat ships and a station that was slowly being taken apart around her. Standard Coalition doctrine in this situation, And I want to be clear about this because it matters for understanding what happened next. Standard doctrine called for requesting the nearest rapid response flotilla. In this region, that would have been the 7th Coalition Rapid Response Group, operating out of a relay point approximately 22 hours away at standard fleet speed. 22 hours, with Karath Station's structural integrity at 61% and falling, carrying 400 people. Commander Vilrath did the math. She invoked Article 14. The Coalition Emergency Relay System, per the Human Integration Protocol, immediately routed the distress signal to the Terran Coordination Office. Standard procedure indicated a 12 to 18-hour response time for initial Terran advisory assets. What the protocol did not account for, what no one had apparently accounted for, was that approximately 300 million kilometers from Karath Station, running a joint training exercise in the Outer Rim transit lanes, was the 6th Terran Expeditionary Fleet. Section 1.4, Personal Account, Petty Officer Dana Reyes, Terran Navy. Recorded at Terran Naval Debrief Facility, Karath Recovery Theater. Interview conducted by Archivist Trainee Mesa Quellen. Standard date, approximately 14 days post-incident. Petty Officer Dana Reyes is 26 years old. Dark hair, medium height, with the particular posture of someone who has spent years being told to stand straight. She speaks quickly and has a habit of backtracking mid-sentence to correct herself. She was aboard the 10 Relentless, the lead ship of the 6th Terran Expeditionary Fleet's 1st Attack Squadron, when the distress call came in. So we were out there doing okay. Look, I'll be honest with you, training exercises this far out are boring. Like deeply, profoundly boring. You're running drills you've run 1,000 times, you're in fold space transit lanes that see maybe 3 ships a week. There is literally nothing happening. Kyra, that's Petty Officer Kyra Oduya, she's in my bunk section. She'd spent the last 2 days teaching herself to braid hair using a piece of rope she'd found somewhere. That's the energy. That's where we were mentally. She pauses and then something shifts in her expression. It's subtle, a slight tightening around the eyes, a repositioning. Then the call came in. I wasn't on the bridge when it happened. I was down in the secondary engineering bay running a diagnostic on the actually, that doesn't matter. What matters is what I heard over the ship-wide intercom because it happened in stages. First, there's the general alert tone, which we'd been running every 8 hours for the drill, so nobody really reacted initially. Then there's Admiral Chen's voice. And the thing about Admiral Chen, okay, I need you to understand something about Admiral Chen. She has this voice. Even when everything is calm, she sounds like she's about to tell you something that will change your life. It's not loud, it's just weighted, like every word is carrying something. Reyes leans forward, and she says over the entire ship, over every single comm channel simultaneously, which is not standard, that's a flag she almost never uses, she says. All personnel, this is Admiral Chen. We have just received an Article 14 distress call from Karath Station. Current distance to Karath Station, approximately 300 million kilometers. Estimated intercept time at emergency fold burst, approximately 90 minutes. We are going in. Battle stations, all hands. Reyes stops. She's smiling slightly, but it's not a happy smile. It's the smile of someone reliving something that scared them and exhilarated them in equal measure, and they still haven't fully sorted out which feeling is larger. And then she said one more thing, just 4 words before the channel clicked off. She said, "Full complement, no holding back." And I remember just standing there in the engineering bay for about 2 seconds with my hand frozen on this diagnostic panel, and then every single person in that bay just moved. Nobody said anything. We just moved. Part 2, 90 minutes. Section 2.1, Personal Account. Lieutenant Commander Oren Vash, Coalition Navy, Karath Station Defense Group. Recorded at Coalition Military Medical Facility, Outer Rim Sector 3. Standard date, approximately 21 days post-incident. Lieutenant Commander Oren Vash is a Selathi, a species characterized by their very large eyes, adapted for the low-light environments of their homeworld's deep canyon systems. He has 4 of them, arranged in 2 pairs, and all 4 were focused on me with an intensity I found slightly uncomfortable during the interview. He was the senior surviving officer of the Karath Station Defense Group by the time the rescue came. He had been awake for approximately 31 hours at that point. I want to start by saying something that might seem strange given everything that happened afterward. When I heard that Commander Vilrath had invoked Article 14, my first reaction was not relief. It was discomfort. I am not ashamed to admit that. Many of my colleagues felt the same way. He pauses, adjusting slightly in his seat. The medical facility lighting is brighter than Salathi prefer, I notice. He keeps his outer eyelid membranes half closed. We knew what Article 14 meant in theory. We knew the humans were capable. The environmental data alone had been enough to generate a certain amount of, let us call it professional respect among coalition military personnel. But there is a difference between knowing something in theory and facing the reality of what it means. When you invoke Article 14, you are saying, we cannot handle this ourselves, we need them. And there is a part of every soldier, regardless of species, that finds that acknowledgement difficult. He folds 3 of his 4 hands together on the table between us. Also, and I want to be very honest here, there were stories. The kind that circulate among military personnel through unofficial channels, not the sanitized biological reports or the diplomatic briefings, the stories. What happened when human ground forces were deployed on Karath IV? What a Terran naval squadron did to a pirate fleet near the Delavar Nebula? Stories that, when you heard them, you thought, this cannot be accurate. This has to be exaggeration. Military mythology. He stops. All 4 eyes focus on me with remarkable precision. I will tell you what happened when we had approximately 40 minutes left before I assessed Karath Station would suffer structural failure. Our sensors picked up a fold space exit signature. Single point, which was strange. Fleets don't emerge from fold space in single points. They stagger exits across a safety radius. And then the reading came back and the technician, a young Brellan named Orin II. His actual name was much longer, but we called him that. He looked at the reading and he said, "Sir, I think something's wrong with my sensors." I asked him what the reading showed. He told me. I told him to recalibrate. He recalibrated. The reading was the same. He stops again. The pause is long enough that I almost ask if he wants to continue. What our sensors were reading was not a reinforcement flotilla. It was not an advisory team. What was emerging from fold space at a vector that put it directly between our position and the Vrethkai assault fleet was the entire 6th Terran Expeditionary Fleet. All of it. Simultaneously. Which is not supposed to be physically possible. The fold space mathematics require staggered exits to prevent. He shakes his head. They modified the fold burst equation. 93 vessels exiting fold space at the same coordinate within a 7-second window. Our engineers told me later that they'd run the math on how that was done and found that it required accepting. I believe the phrase they used was tolerances that should not be tolerated. Safety margins that no other species would have accepted. He looks down at his folded hands. The Vrethkai saw it too. I was watching their fleet disposition on sensors when the Terran ships came through. And I want you to document this specifically because I think it is important. The Vrethkai assault force, 47 combat vessels that had been systematically dismantling a coalition station for 14 hours, they paused. Every single one of them. All firing ceased. All maneuvering stopped. For approximately 11 seconds, nothing moved. 11 seconds. I have thought about those 11 seconds many times since. I have a theory about what was happening in those 11 seconds. The Vrethkai were doing what my technician did. They were looking at the sensor readings, and they were recalibrating, and the readings were the same. Section 2.2, Recovered Sensor Log, 10 Relentless Bridge Recording. Partial Transcript, Visual Log Reconstruction. Recovered by Coalition Terran Joint Recovery Team, post-incident. Note, some dialogue reconstructed from partial audio. Bracketed sections indicate areas of reconstruction uncertainty. Bridge 10 Relentless, fold exit plus 0 seconds. The bridge of the Relentless comes into focus in fractured segments. The fold burst itself generates electromagnetic interference that takes the sensors approximately 3 seconds to clear. What we see in those first 3 seconds is light and static, and the silhouettes of crew members at their stations. Then the picture resolves. Admiral Chen is standing at the command deck. She is a compact woman in her late 50s, with close-cropped gray hair and a posture that looks less like military discipline and more like someone who simply grew that way, like a tree that stopped accommodating the wind. She is watching the main display. Her hands are clasped behind her back. The display shows Karath Station. At this range, approximately 1,400 kilometers now, closing fast, you can see the damage. Hull sections dark. One of the orbital platforms listing at approximately 30 degrees off its axis. The station's running lights flickering in the uneven pattern that indicates compromised power routing. And surrounding it, the Vrethkai fleet, 47 vessels arrayed in the assault pattern they'd been holding for hours. There's a voice from sensors, we can't make out the name, the audio reconstruction is incomplete here, and they say, "Reading confirmed, Admiral, all 93 vessels report clean fold exit. We are." A pause. "We are reading 47 Vrethkai combat vessels. Station integrity at approximately 58%, Admiral, falling." Admiral Chen doesn't move for a moment. Then she says very quietly, "Weapons, what do we have hot?" "Everything, Admiral." Another pause, 3, maybe 4 seconds. Then she says, "Open a channel to the Vrethkai fleet, all frequency broadcast, every vessel." Channel open. And what she says next, I've listened to this recording many times. I've listened to it enough that I have memorized the exact inflection, the exact timing of the spaces between words. She says, "Vrethkai fleet, this is Admiral Lin Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Navy, commanding the 6th Terran Expeditionary Fleet. You have attacked a coalition installation carrying protected civilian personnel. You have approximately 30 seconds to begin withdrawing your forces. This is the only communication you will receive. Chen out." The channel clicks closed. Someone on the bridge, junior crew, unidentified, says very quietly, "30 seconds, Admiral." And Admiral Chen says, without turning around, "They won't need 30 seconds. Watch." She was right. In 15 seconds, the Vrethkai fleet began to move. Section 2.3, Personal Account. Subcommander Reth Orani's, Karath Station Defense Group. Recorded at Coalition Military Medical Facility, Outer Rim Sector 3. Standard date, approximately 21 days post-incident. Subcommander Reth Orani's is a Keth like Commander Vilrath, same species, compact build, with the faint iridescent quality to their skin that Keth develop in high-stress environments. A biological response, apparently. When I met him, he was still slightly iridescent. He was the second in command that Commander Vilrath had been speaking to in the final fragments of the distress recording. The Reth, she'd called by name. "You have to understand where we were mentally at that point," he said. "We had been fighting for 14 hours. We'd lost people. We'd lost friends. I had personally watched Platform 3 go dark, and there were people I knew on Platform 3. You get to a point in that kind of sustained engagement where you stop having big feelings about things. You sort of triage your emotions the same way you triage resources. You put everything into staying functional, and you defer everything else for later. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're not entirely sure if later is going to exist." He pauses. "When the fold exit alarm went off, my first thought, genuinely, my first thought was more Vrethkai, because that's where my mind was. I was already calculating what additional Vrethkai ships would mean for our remaining structural window. How much faster the station would fail. Then Oren's second, the sensor technician, he started making a sound I hadn't heard him make before. A kind of, it wasn't quite words. It was the sound someone makes when they see something that doesn't process correctly, and I looked at the display. He stops, he looks down at the table. 93 ships, coming out of fold space like they'd been fired from something, like they were a weapon that had been launched and was now arriving. And they weren't staggered. They were together. All of them, this wall of ships, and they just appeared between us and the Vrethkai like someone had inserted a wall of iron into the space between us. He pauses again. And they were large. I don't know if you understand how large. I've seen Coalition fleet vessels. I've seen the big carriers. The Terran ships were different. Not just in size, though the size was the Relentless alone is longer than Karath Station's primary habitat ring. But it wasn't just size. It was the shape of them. The design, everything about those ships looked like it had been made with a single purpose in mind, and that purpose was not exploration or trade or patrol. He looks up at me. I've had 90 days to think about what I felt in that moment, and the only word I have for it still is relieved. Terrifyingly, almost shamefully relieved. Because whatever those ships were built for, whatever the humans who built them were, they were on our side. And in that moment, that was the only thing that mattered. Part 3, the engagement. Section 3.1, personal account, Petty Officer Dana Reyes continued. I was at my station when we came out of fold. Secondary engineering, but we had a display. We always had a display, because being in secondary engineering without knowing what's happening outside is actually more terrifying than knowing. So I saw the Vrethkai fleet on sensors at the same time the bridge was processing it. And I need to tell you something about what went through my mind, because I think it's important for understanding what happened next. I wasn't afraid. I know that sounds wrong. 47 Vrethkai combat vessels, one of their siege platforms alone could punch through our standard shielding, but I genuinely was not afraid. I felt something, definitely, but it wasn't fear. It was more like, do you know the feeling you get at the very top of a roller coaster, right before it drops? That specific second where your body knows what's about to happen, and it's sort of thrilling and sort of awful, and completely real in a way that ordinary moments don't feel. She pauses. That. Admiral Chen's 30-second warning went out and I was watching sensors, and I could see the Vrethkai processing it. You could track it in their movements. First, nothing, 11 seconds where nobody moved, and I imagine every Vrethkai commander was doing exactly what we were doing, running numbers, confirming readings, trying to figure out what they were seeing. Then, around the 12-second mark, some of the lighter attack craft started repositioning. Not withdrawing yet, repositioning like they were trying to find an angle, a gap in our formation. She pauses. There were no gaps. Admiral Chen had arranged us, and I had not been on the bridge for the exit, and I still don't know exactly when she planned this, whether it was in the 90 minutes on the way or whether she planned it in real time as we came through. She had arranged us in a configuration I had never seen in any drill. It wasn't a standard attack formation or a defensive formation. It was a closing formation. We came out of fold space in the shape of something that was already tightening, already reducing the space the Vrethkai had to maneuver in. Every second that passed, we were at minimum 1 kilometer closer to optimal engagement range. And the Vrethkai saw it. That's the thing, they saw what was happening. Their lighter craft were trying to find a gap because they understood that if the formation completed, the gap would cease to exist. And they were right. The math was right, but there were no gaps. When the 30 seconds expired, there were still approximately 23 Vrethkai vessels that had not begun withdrawing. 6 of the lighter attack craft had started moving away from the station toward what they must have calculated as the best exit vector. The rest. She stops. The rest stayed. I don't know if it was pride or calculation or some failure of understanding about what they were facing. I think about it sometimes. What was happening in those commanders' minds? Did they think we were bluffing? Did they think their siege platforms were sufficient? Did they genuinely not understand what 93 Terran combat vessels meant in practical terms? When the 30 seconds expired, Admiral Chen said 2 words, ship-wide, all frequency, just 2 words. Light them. Section 3.2, Technical Analysis, Engagement Summary. Compiled by Coalition Terran Joint Military Review Board. Classification, Restricted Level 7. The following is a condensed summary of the engagement between the 6th Terran Expeditionary Fleet and the Vrethkai Assault Force, as reconstructed from sensor logs, ship records, and post-incident analysis. Total engagement duration from first Terran weapons discharge to cessation of all Vrethkai offensive activity, 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I want to let that number sit for a moment. 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The Vrethkai Assault Force had been working on Karath Station for 14 hours. It had taken them 14 hours to reduce the station to 58% structural integrity with a full defensive complement fighting back. The 6th Terran Expeditionary Fleet resolved the situation in 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The tactical analysis is extensive, and I will not reproduce all of it here, but the key elements are as follows. The coordinated fold burst exit had placed the Terran fleet in an encirclement configuration before the Vrethkai could reposition. This was deliberate. The fold burst mathematics had been calculated to achieve exactly this spatial arrangement on emergence. The safety margins referenced in Section 2.1 were accepted specifically because the alternative, a standard staggered exit, would have given the Vrethkai fleet time to redistribute and find exit vectors. When Admiral Chen gave the order to engage, the firing sequence was coordinated across all 93 vessels simultaneously. The Vrethkai's 2 heavy siege platforms, their most formidable assets, were prioritized in the first 3 seconds of engagement. Both were disabled within the first 7 seconds. Not destroyed, disabled. The Joint Review Board's analysis indicates this was intentional. Admiral Chen had apparently communicated to her fleet commanders that she wanted the Vrethkai to have functioning ships that could limp away, because she wanted the Vrethkai survivors to go home and report what they had seen. The remaining 23 vessels that had not initially withdrawn began withdrawing immediately upon the engagement opening. Of the 6 lighter attack craft that had attempted to find exit vectors during the 30-second window, 4 successfully escaped. The other 2 found that their calculated exit vector had been closed by Terran fleet repositioning during the warning period. Those 2 vessels surrendered. This is documented in the sensor logs. Their weapon signatures went dark and they broadcast a standard Coalition-recognized ceasefire signal. They were escorted to a holding position and later transferred to Coalition custody. Their crews were, by all accounts, relatively unharmed and extremely quiet. The 4 Vrethkai vessels that successfully escaped are presumably the source of whatever reports reached Vrethkai Dominion Command. The Joint Review Board's intelligence section notes that Vrethkai border activity in this sector dropped to 0 within approximately 6 standard weeks of the incident and has not resumed. Of the vessels that initially stayed and faced the engagement, 0 were destroyed. This was also intentional. The Terran fleet's engagement protocols, as subsequently reviewed by the board, indicate that Admiral Chen's standing orders for this engagement specified maximum incapacitation, minimum destruction. She wanted them to be able to go home. She wanted them to remember. Section 3.3, Personal Account. Ambassador Grevik Olanth continued. I was in the station's emergency shelter when the engagement happened. We had been moved there approximately 6 hours into the Vrethkai assault. It was a confined space. Approximately 30 people, diplomatic observation staff, some civilian contractors who had been aboard for a maintenance inspection, a few off-duty military personnel who had been directed to protect us. The shelter had no external sensors. It was a hardened emergency bunker designed to be sealed off from everything. What we had was a single interior display connected to the station's internal communications system. It could show us environmental readings for the shelter, air composition, structural integrity readings for the immediate section, nothing external. What we did not have was any idea what was happening outside. The fighting had been going on for so long that we had developed a particular kind of relationship with the sounds, the vibrations. When something hit the station, you could feel it through the deck plating. Different kinds of hits had different feels. I had learned over 14 hours to distinguish between weapons impacts on the outer hull and structural microfailures in the station's internal framework. We had all learned this. None of us had wanted to learn it. We learned it anyway. So I can tell you exactly what it felt like when the Terran engagement began, because the sounds changed. For 14 hours, the station had been absorbing impacts at intervals. Never constant, there were pauses, tactical repositioning, periods of relative quiet followed by sustained fire. We had adapted to that rhythm. It was terrible, but it had a rhythm. When the Terran fleet opened fire, the station stopped shaking. It just stopped, and the silence was, I cannot accurately describe the silence that followed. It was the silence of an absence so complete that we didn't know how to process it. Several people in the shelter made involuntary sounds, not words, just sounds. Because 14 hours of sustained vibration had become our baseline, had become our definition of what existence felt like in that moment, and suddenly that baseline was gone, and we didn't know what to do with the absence. Someone, one of the civilian contractors, a Brellan female, said, "What happened?" Nobody answered because nobody knew. And then the station's internal communications system crackled. And a voice came through that I had never heard before, not Commander Vilrath's voice, not Subcommander Orani's, not any of the station personnel we'd been receiving intermittent updates from. A new voice, calm, female, with an accent I recognized as Terran Standard English, which I had encountered before but only in civilian contexts. The voice said, "Attention all Karath Station personnel, this is Admiral Lin Chen of the 6th Terran Expeditionary Fleet. The Vrethkai assault force has been neutralized. All hostile vessels are either withdrawing, disabled, or in custody. Karath Station is secure. We are beginning damage assessment and medical support transfer now. You are safe." Ambassador Olenth stops here. He is quiet for several seconds. "You are safe." He says the words again, softly, apparently not intending them for the interview recording, just for himself. "I have been a diplomat for 31 years. I have been in difficult situations before. Not like this, nothing quite like this, but difficult situations. I have some experience with hearing important words at important moments. I know the difference between words that are just words and words that carry something real inside them." She said, "You are safe," and every single person in that shelter believed her. Instantly, without question. We didn't know her. We had never heard her voice before, but something in those words, something in the way she said them, made them simply true. As though the concept of safety had been transmitted directly through the comm system, and we had absorbed it. A Thurvan male, another diplomat larger than me, someone who had maintained almost perfect composure through the entire 14-hour assault, made a sound I had never heard him make before. It took me a moment to identify it. He was crying. The particular sound Thurvan make when they cry, which is very quiet, almost inaudible, a kind of rhythmic pressure release. He was just standing there in this hardened shelter, and he was making that sound, and he had no idea he was making it. And I realized, approximately 10 seconds later, that I was doing something similar. Part 4, Aftermath. Section 4.1, Personal Account. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Unipark, 10 Relentless. Recorded at Terran Naval Debrief Facility, Karath Recovery Theater. Standard date, approximately 14 days post-incident. Dr. Unipark is 43 years old. She has the particular energy of someone who has been doing intensive work for many consecutive days, not exhausted exactly, but running on a frequency that's slightly higher than normal. She is a medical officer, but she carries herself like something more than that, like someone who has seen things that have expanded her understanding of what her work means. She was in charge of the medical transfer teams that boarded Karath Station after the engagement ended. I'll be honest with you, what I expected to find when we boarded was bad. The structural integrity numbers, the 14-hour engagement, the casualty reports that had been fragmentary but enough to give us a general picture. I had organized the transfer teams for high casualties. I had staged everything for the worst. What I found was it was bad. I don't want to minimize it. People had died. 47 personnel across the station's various sections. Dozens more with injuries ranging from moderate to critical. The station had sections that looked like they'd been through a mining collapse, debris, structural failures, power routing chaos. It was genuinely bad. But there was something else, something I hadn't expected. The people who were alive, the station personnel who had been fighting for 14 hours, they were still fighting. Not literally. The fighting was over. But they were still in that mode, still moving, still functioning, still tending to each other, still cataloging damage and organizing resources. Commander Vilrath was in the station's secondary command center when we arrived, which itself was remarkable, because the primary command center had taken a direct hit approximately 4 hours into the assault, and she was running 4 simultaneous assessments from a console that was missing half its interface panels. She had improvised replacement displays from what looked like emergency diagnostic equipment and 3 different types of tablet devices. Dr. Park pauses. She looked up when I came in and she said, "I have a list." And she handed me a comprehensive triage priority document that she had apparently been updating continuously during the engagement. Every injured personnel, their location, their injury type, their stability assessment. Everything organized by priority, with notations about available on-site medical resources. I stood there looking at this document that she had somehow produced in the middle of 14 hours of sustained assault, and I thought, these are remarkable beings. Whatever species Commander Vilrath is, whatever these people are, they did not give up. They organized. In the middle of everything, they organized. She pauses again, longer this time. And then I thought about what was on the other side of that station's hull. 93 Terran warships. And I thought about the fact that the people in this station had sent the signal that brought them here. That Commander Vilrath, running 4 simultaneous assessments with improvised display panels, had done the calculation and invoked Article 14, and then kept fighting in the 14 hours it took for the fleet to arrive. That's the part I keep coming back to. The part that doesn't get into the official reports because it's not tactical or strategic. Commander Vilrath didn't invoke Article 14 and then wait. She invoked Article 14, and then continued to do everything she possibly could for 14 hours while help was coming. She didn't stop being responsible for her station and her people just because she'd asked for help. Dr. Park looks directly at me. I want that in the archive, that specific thing, it matters. I've made sure it's in the archive. Section 4.2, Personal Account. Petty Officer Dana Reyes continued. I was on one of the engineering assessment teams that went over to the station. Not medical, I'm not trained for medical, but structural engineering, which overlaps with my secondary rating. So I got to go over on the second wave about 2 hours after the engagement ended. I'd never been on a station that had taken that kind of sustained fire. I'd trained for it, we all trained for it, but training is training, and the real thing is the real thing. The smell first. I wasn't expecting the smell. Something chemical and something organic and something that I don't have a word for, the particular smell of a habitat that has been stressed in ways habitats aren't designed to be stressed. It settles in your nose and doesn't leave quickly. And then the people. The station personnel we encountered, they were all different species, which I knew intellectually, but it still takes a moment when you're actually in it. Keth and Selathi and Brellan and Thurvan and a few others I couldn't immediately identify. They'd all been through the same 14 hours, and they were all in various states of that post-sustained crisis mode where you're still running but the ground underneath you has changed, and you're not completely sure how to adjust yet. Most of them looked at us the way I imagine people look at something they've been waiting for long enough that when it arrives they can't quite confirm it's real. Just watchful, not unfriendly, just carefully checking that we were actually there. There was one moment I'll tell you about specifically. I was in what had been a secondary storage section. We were assessing whether the bulkhead integrity was sufficient to allow access to a damaged power routing junction, and there was a Selathi crew member in there already doing her own assessment. Young, maybe equivalent to early 20s in human terms, though I can never be sure with Selathi. She had a diagnostic device in 2 of her 4 hands and was carefully working her way around the perimeter of the room. I came in and she looked at me, those big eyes, all 4 of them. And she said in Coalition Standard, which she spoke well, "You came." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I didn't know if you would. I didn't know if the signal had gotten through." And I said, "It got through." And she looked at me for another moment, and then she looked back at her diagnostic device and she said, "Thank you," very quietly, just those 2 words, and then she went back to her assessment. I went back to my assessment. But I've thought about that moment a lot since then. The way she said it, "You came." Not "you saved us," or "thank you for fighting," or anything dramatic, just "you came." The fundamental, simple fact of it. We said we needed help and you came. I think about that and I think about what it means to be the kind of people who come when the signal arrives. What it means to be built for that. Whether we chose it or whether the universe that shaped us made the choice, one organism and one generation at a time, across millions of years of an environment that never, ever made things easy. We came, that's what we do, we come. Section 4.3, Personal Account. Ambassador Grevik Olenth, final segment. I met Admiral Chen in person, approximately 4 hours after the engagement ended. She came aboard the station herself, which I understand was not protocol. The senior fleet commander is not supposed to board a compromised station before structural stability is confirmed. I asked about this later and was told that protocol had been noted and Admiral Chen had acknowledged the notation and then proceeded anyway. She was smaller than I expected. This seems to be a consistent reaction among species that meet humans for the first time after only knowing them by reputation. They are smaller than you expect. The environmental reports and the biological data create an image, and then the actual creature arrives, and it is this manageable-sized primate with 2 arms and 2 legs, and it looks at you with eyes that are frankly quite ordinary, and nothing about the exterior gives you any indication of what is inside. She found me in the medical section, where I had been taken after the shelter was opened. Not because I was seriously injured, some bruising, some stress-related respiratory difficulty that the human medics addressed with remarkable efficiency, but because it was the organized space, and I had been in an unorganized space for a long time, and I needed an organized space. She walked in, and the medical staff moved slightly to indicate her. And I looked at this compact, gray-haired human woman, and I thought, This is the person. This is the person who looked at a sensor display showing 47 enemy combat vessels and said 30 seconds. This is the person who moved 93 ships through fold space at tolerances no one else would accept because the math said it was possible, and a station full of people needed help. She looked at me and she said, "Ambassador Olenth, I'm Admiral Chen. I wanted to check on the diplomatic personnel personally. Are you all right?" And I said, "I am, thank you, Admiral." And she said, "Good, we'll have you transferred to the Relentless within the hour. It's not as comfortable as a proper diplomatic transport, but our medical facilities are significantly better equipped right now." And this is the part I keep returning to when I try to understand humans as a species, as a civilization, as a phenomenon, she said, "I heard you've been through a rough night. Can I get you anything? Coffee. We have excellent coffee." Coffee? Admiral Lin Chen, commander of 93 warships that had just resolved in 4 minutes what a Vrethkai assault force had been doing for 14 hours, was asking me if I wanted coffee. I said yes, because what else do you say? She arranged the coffee. It arrived in a ceramic cup with a small Terran naval insignia on the side. It was extraordinary. I sat in the medical section of a station that was still in the process of being put back together, and I drank this remarkable coffee, and I thought about everything I had thought I understood about humans before this night. I had thought I understood them because a woman had explained the difference between coffee and espresso to me at a trade summit. I had looked at this soft-spoken, cookie-bringing, coffee-loving creature, and I had categorized her as comprehensible. I was right, in a way. They are comprehensible. But I had only comprehended one dimension of something that has far more dimensions than I had space for in my categorization. They bring coffee and they bake cookies, and they explain their beverages with genuine passion, and they laugh at small things. And when the signal comes, when someone they have never met in a station they have never visited sends out the message that says we need help, we cannot do this alone, please. They fold-burst 93 ships through mathematics that should not be survivable, and they arrive in 90 minutes, and they spend 4 minutes and 17 seconds making sure the threat cannot threaten again. And then the Admiral comes aboard personally and asks if you want coffee. All of that is the same species. All of that is the same kind of being. The coffee and the fold burst. The cookies and the 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The same hands that explain espresso are the hands that plan the encirclement formation. The same voice that asks, "Are you all right?" is the voice that said, "Light them." I don't know if other species have a word for this. I don't think Thurvan does. This combination of things that should not be in the same creature. This warmth and this lethality coexisting in something that is clearly, genuinely, both at once. I have been trying to write a report for the Thurvan Diplomatic Corps about the incident. I have been trying to write it for 90 days. I cannot find the correct framework. Nothing I have in my diplomatic vocabulary quite fits what I experienced. The closest I have come is this. There is a difference between a species that is dangerous and a species that is dangerous and cares. A species that is dangerous alone is simply a threat to be managed. But a species that is dangerous and cares is something else entirely. Something the universe doesn't produce very often. Maybe something the universe produces only once, on one particular world, under one particular set of conditions that shape them into something that can do both things with equal sincerity. I don't know if I'm expressing this well. I'm not sure it can be expressed well. But I want it in the archive because I think it matters. I think it might be the most important thing in the archive. They came because they cared. They were capable of coming because of what they are. And when it was over, the Admiral brought coffee. And the coffee was excellent. Part 5, Final Testimonies. Section 5.1, Personal Account. Commander Essa Vilrath, Karath Station. Recorded at Coalition Military Medical Facility, Outer Rim Sector 3. Standard date, approximately 30 days post-incident. Commander Essa Vilrath is recovered. I want to note that clearly, because the preliminary medical reports I saw before conducting this interview were not encouraging, and I was prepared for a more fragile interview subject. She is not fragile. She is, if anything, more settled than I expected, as though whatever the 14 hours and the aftermath required of her has become part of her foundation now, something integrated rather than something survived. She declined to talk about the 14 hours in any detail. The numbers are in the report, she said. What I want to talk about is what happened after. So we talked about after. The first Terran personnel who came aboard, the medical teams and the engineering assessment teams, they were so organized. I know that sounds strange. After 14 hours, you might expect that organization would be what I wanted most, and in some ways it was, but the specific way they were organized was startling. They had apparently planned for multiple scenarios during the 90-minute transit, and they had materials and protocols for each scenario. And they assessed which scenario Karath station matched within the first 10 minutes of boarding, and then they were just moving, doing the work. No discussion, no committee. Just, this is the situation. This is what the situation requires. Here we go. She pauses. One of the engineering petty officers, Reyes, I learned her name later, found me in the secondary command center, and she had a structural assessment device, and she started going through the station section by section, running analysis, and she was talking to me while she worked. Not asking me to do anything, just talking, telling me what she was finding, including me in her process. It took me a little while to realize what she was doing, and when I did, I thought, she knows I need to still be in charge of something. She knows I need to still have a function. And she is finding a way to give me that without making it explicit. Without drawing attention to the fact that she's doing it. I don't know if that was deliberate or instinctive. I should have asked. I didn't ask because it felt like something I should be able to do silently, receiving a kindness and not making it awkward by examining it out loud. She stops for a moment. I invoked Article 14 because the math required it. I want that to be clear. It was not an emotional decision. I looked at the numbers, and the numbers said, Standard Coalition reinforcement will not arrive in time. The only resource within range is the Terran fleet, if there is a Terran fleet within range, which my signals would not confirm, but which was worth attempting. So I attempted it. But I will tell you something about the moment I heard Admiral Chen's voice on the comm system. The 4 words, "You are safe." I will tell you that I did not cry because I was Commander Essa Vilrath of Karath Station and there were still 400 people on the station and I did not have the time. But there was approximately 2 seconds before I remembered all of that where something in me just let go. Just briefly. 2 seconds of some interior tension, releasing that I hadn't even known I was holding. Because you don't know how tight your wound until something gives you permission to unwind. 2 seconds, and then I had a station to bring back online. She looks at me. I would like, if the archive permits, to address something to whoever reads this document in whatever future tense these archives are accessed. Of course, I tell her, please. What happened at Karath Station is documented in detail in this file. The tactical elements, the engineering elements, the medical outcomes, the political aftermath, all of it is here. But I think the thing that doesn't fully exist in the numbers and the sensor logs is what it meant to receive that response. To send a signal into the void saying we need help, knowing that the situation might already be past recovery, knowing that the mathematics of distance and response time might simply not work out in our favor, knowing that you might be sending a signal that reaches someone in time to find only wreckage. And then to have it work, to have the signal arrive and be received and to have someone look at it and say, 90 minutes, we can do 90 minutes. And then to have those 90 minutes actually deliver something. That's not a military achievement. It's not a diplomatic achievement. It's something older than that. It's the thing that makes civilization worth having, not the weapons and not the tactics, the decision to go. The decision that someone else's emergency is a sufficient reason to move everything you have as fast as you can move it. I don't know what Terran children are taught about why their species is what it is. I don't know what stories they tell, but I hope some version of this is in there. Not the fleet, not the firepower, the decision to go. The 90 minutes.